So once you've got your yarn that you're going to use, and you've got your you've got your slip knot on your hook, and you've got the same hook that you've been using throughout, which, if you're following along with me, is a 4mm hook. So what we need to do now is chain a chain of 4. And then what we're going to be doing, because we're going to be working in the round today. So, well, I say working in the round. I'm going to start off in the round, but we're going to be turning it into a square. Now, as you probably already know, our squares are based around the number 12. So this square isn't going to be anything different. It's just it starts off small and grows out. So by the time you start, we're starting off with 4, but we need to turn it into a circle. So we do that by going all the way back to your very first chain, going through it, and we're going to do what's called a slip stitch. So you yarn over and pull all the way through both. So in theory you now have, I'll zoom in a little bit, so you now have a hole. And this is where we're going to be working through for the first round anyway. You can also, if you do it how I do it, I actually work over the tail, but you don't have to. You can leave that out at the end, crochet that in at the end. So on this one, we are going to be using a treble, which is the same as what we did on these ones. We're not going to do anything fancy on this one. We're just going to use a trebles. So you yarn over, go into the centre of the circle, yarn over and pull back through. Like so. And then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2 more. That's one way of doing it. But the other way of doing it, which I'm going to be doing for this round, is chaining 3. So that's the way I'm going to do it for this round anyway. So once you've done that, you then we're going to be working in clusters. So every cluster will have 3. So this chain 3 here counts as 1 treble. So we need to put 2 more trebles into the centre of the space. So you yarn over, go back in through the hole, yarn over, pull back through, yarn over, pull through the first 2, and then yarn over, pull through the second 2. Do that one more time, like so, and that will be your first cluster. And like I've just said, we're going to be working in the round, but to turn it into a square, we need to do two chains. Now, depending on how tight you are, you can do 1 more chain or you can do 1 less chain. I tend to do 2 because I feel like it works out to be a better corner. Now on this first round, we're going to have 4 clusters. So we're going to start on the second cluster, but because we don't have this chain space from starting, we just need to do 3 trebles. So yarn over, go in and do the 1, 2, 3. So now you'll have 2 sets of clusters with a chain 2 space in the middle. So that's your first corner. So we need to make the second corner. So chain another 2. And now we need to make the third cluster. So yarn over and do, went in too fast there, doing your 3 sets of, your 3 trebles to make your third set of third cluster. Even can't get my words out properly today. So that's your third cluster. So now we need to do the third corner. Just get a bit more looped around. So that's chain 2. And now we need to work in and do your last cluster. So you yarn over to your 3 trebles. And now we're at the last corner space. So now what we can do before we do the last chain 2, if you have been working over the top of it like I have, you can pull it tight a little bit and it will close up the hole a little bit, but you'll still have a little bit of a hole. Later on I will show you another way of doing starting it without doing chains. We call it a cinch circle or a magic ring. I will show you out later on how to do that. But for now we're just doing chain. So now we've tightened it up a little bit, we can do our last corner by chaining 2. And then at the top of the chain 3 space that you have down here, find the top chain, like so, and slip stitch into it. Like that. And now we've got round 1 done. Now round 1 is just literally to establish it. Round 2, there's different ways of doing it. Now for every round, I know I probably said the chain 3 space is the only chain 3 space you're going to do. For squares like this, I tend to do a 2-row repeat. Mainly because on an even row, you'll need to go from where you are here, where you're here, to jump to here, or jumper space in the word. You're going to be jumping over your cluster from the below from the previous round. So that's slightly different to an odd row. So this is an even row. So in even rows, you need to chain 4. Okay. Now in this round, I will be doing a chain 1 in between each cluster and a chain 2 on every corner. So we've got a chain 4 here, which will class as your first 3 chains will be your last treble. So we'll deal with that once we get to the end, at the end. And then the last chain, the 4th chain, will be classed as the chain in which you're going to be hopping over the cluster from the row below. So now we've done that, we now need to hop into this corner space here. And every corner, no matter which row you're on, odd or even, get exactly the same. They get 2 clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. So because that's what we're working into now, that's what we're going to do now. So you do a cluster which is 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3. Slide it over a little bit and chain 2. And now we'll need to work another 3 trebles into that space to make the second cluster. Like so. And there you go. So that's your first corner of your second round done. Now we need to chain 1. Like I said, every time we're hopping over a cluster from the previous row, we're going to chain 1 until we get to the corner space. Once you get to your corner spaces, you'll be chaining 2. So because we're on the second round, we're already at the corner space. So the corner space will get exactly the same as what the last corner space is going to just done, which is 2 sets of clusters, 2 clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. So we're going to do our first cluster, which is 3 trebles. Like so. And then we do chain 2. and then turn and work a little bit, pull that down a bit, and do our second cluster. So we've done the second cluster. Now we need to chain 1 to hop over this cluster from the row below, and we're at our next corner space. So we need to do 2 clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. Chain 2 and do your last cluster. Like so. So that is your your third corner done. So we need to hop over to where the 4th corner is. So once you've chained your 1, we're now working into the last corner space. But as I said at the beginning of this round, you've already got a third of your second cluster done. So we need to do a full cluster like we normally do. Like so. Then chain 2. And now in our last cluster, we only need to do 2 trebles. Because in theory, the chain 3 out the first chain 4 counts as your last treble. So 1, 2. And now you need to count 3 chains up from the bottom to 1, 2, 3, and then slip stitch into top of it, like so. And that's the end of round 2. So every round, you'll notice, will increase a space in between your corners. So we've gone from 4 sets of clusters to 8 sets of clusters. So 8 clusters. So each cluster will, each round will add 4 clusters. Yeah? So I think this is actually going to be a 3 rounds, not 4. Can't do my maths. So next round, we've got what we're going to, so this is the last round, because 8 add 4 equals 12. So we're going to do, so what we're going to do in this round is chain 3, and then do 2 more trebles into this space right below. So that's why an odd and even rows are slightly different, because on an odd row, you'll be working straight into the space that you've just chain 1 space you've just slipped into in theory. And on an even row, you'll be chaining 4 to hop over, because you'll be at the end of that chain space, not the beginning of the chain space. If you're at the end of a chain space, you need to be chaining 4 to hop over to create the last treble, and then the chain 1, the 4th chain of that chain 4 will be then hopping up, be used to hop over into the corner. So we've just done a first treble, a first cluster even. So we just need to chain 1 to hop over that cluster from the previous row, which then leads us to our corner space. And like I said on the previous round even, we're going to be doing every round, or every corner gets the same. So that is 2 clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. So that's what we're going to do here. So 3 trebles, which equals our cluster, like so. Chain 2, and then do our last cluster like that. So there we go. So now we need to chain 1 to hop over this cluster from the bottom. And then we're working straight into the next chain 1 space from the row below. Like so. And then chain 1 at the end. And then we're at our corner space, which gets a cluster, chain 2, cluster. And then you chain 1 to leave, which then brings you up to the chain 1 space from the row below, which you put a cluster in. Chain 1, which brings you up to your next corner space, which gets a cluster, chain 2 and a cluster. Chain 1 to leave, which hops over this cluster, which brings you to the next chain space, which you put a cluster in. Chain 1 to leave, which brings you up to the next corner space, which was where I'll meet back up here. So I've just done my last cluster into the chain 1 space from the row below, and I've chained 1. So now I'm at my last corner, which, like the previous corners on this round, gets 2 clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. So that's what I'm going to quickly do now. So that's the first cluster, chain 2, and then I'm going to work my last cluster. Like so. And then, like we have been doing, every time we hop a cluster from the row below, we need to chain 1. That will bring us up to the chain 3 space from the row from the starting of this round. So like on the other rounds, that's where we need to slip stitch. Yep. So there we go. Now, if you go around and count, you should have 12 sets of clusters, which will mean you'll have 9 stitches plus 2 stitches in the middle for your chain spaces. So that's what so that's as big as what we need to do, because we need 3.5 inches, and that's 3.5 inches. So, and we have in theory got a chain 1 here, chain 1 here, and 2 chain 1s in the middle. So we can, like we do on previous squares, tie off now. So tie off exactly the same as you would normally. Just need to get my pair of scissors. Like so. And then go and make the same amount of squares using this process as on the other ones. If you are doing these bigger, you can, but just make sure you've got the same amount of stitches along one side, or actually all 4 sides, than you have on your other squares. Because once we actually get them all finished, we need to make sure we've got the same amount of stitches, because we need the same stitch counts. Okay. So once you've done that, I'll see you next week. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I'll make sure in the description box there will be the amount that I'm doing. I'm doing roughly 15 to 20 squares. And next week, can't remember what I put down for. I think next week I will be showing you how to do this again with the magic ring, and I will be alternating the colours as well. So I will be showing you how to do that next week. So keep tuned for that. Yeah, so see you next week. Bye.